This story is inspired by true events, but all names and details have been changed to protect the identity of those involved. Now imagine sitting in a lawyer's office, waiting for the reading of one of the wealthiest men's wills in the country. The family is gathered, expecting mansions, estates, and fortunes to be divided among them. But when the envelope is opened, the heir to his billion-dollar empire isn't a son, a wife, or even a distant nephew. It's his dog. Yes, his loyal four-legged companion suddenly became the richest pet in America. The room went silent. Shock and disbelief spread like wildfire. Who in their right mind would leave everything to a dog? It sounded outrageous, until the truth began to unfold. Because behind that decision, hidden beneath layers of wealth and power, there was a secret that would shake the family to its core and reveal what loyalty, love, and the meaning of family truly are. This isn't just a story about money. It's about devotion, sacrifice, and a master plan no one saw coming. A story that will challenge the way you think about inheritance, about trust, and about what really matters in life. But before we dive in, I have a request for you. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from, your city and state. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and who knows, maybe your hometown will be the next to get a shout out in one of our videos. So take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear may sound unbelievable. But trust me, it's closer to reality than you think. The will reading. The heavy oak doors creaked as they opened, releasing a draft of cold air from the polished marble hall into the law office. Outside, the bustle of New York City carried on, horns blaring and footsteps echoing against the sidewalks. But inside that office on Park Avenue, time seemed to slow. Every eye was fixed on the mahogany table where a single envelope lay waiting. An envelope that contained the final wishes of one of America's most enigmatic billionaires. The family had gathered, dressed in black, though the mourning felt less about grief and more about appearances. His eldest son, Robert, checked his Rolex every few minutes, impatient. His daughter, Catherine, dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief, though no real tears came. In the corner sat nieces, nephews, and estranged cousins, each calculating what piece of the empire might soon belong to them. They weren't here for closure. They were here for fortune. The lawyer, a thin man with silver hair and glasses perched low on his nose, adjusted his papers and cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. We are here to honor the last will and testament of Mr. Richard Harrison. At the mention of the name, silence swept the room. Richard Harrison, the real estate tycoon, the man whose empire stretched from Manhattan skyscrapers to sprawling estates in California. A man who had built his fortune with iron determination and a reputation that left both admiration and fear in his wake. And now his final words were about to be revealed. The lawyer slid the envelope open with practiced precision and began to read. I, Richard Harrison, being of sound mind and body, declare this to be my last will and testament. The standard legal phrases came first, predictable and formal. The family sat upright, anticipation building. Robert leaned forward, already picturing himself stepping into his father's shoes. Catherine's lips curled into a faint smile, as if she could already feel the weight of diamonds on her wrists. And then, to my loyal companion, my golden retriever Max, I leave my entire estate. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. At first, no one reacted. It was as if the brain couldn't quite process what the ears had just heard. A dog? Surely there had been a mistake. The lawyer continued, his voice steady, though the room itself trembled with disbelief. All assets, including properties, accounts, and holdings, shall be placed under the name and care of Max, my golden retriever, to be managed by a trustee in accordance with my wishes. Gasps broke the silence. Catherine's silk handkerchief fell to the floor. Robert slammed his palm against the table. This is absurd. A dog? He left billions to a dog? Whispers rippled through the room like wildfire. Cousins exchanged wide-eyed glances, while nephews chuckled nervously, waiting for the punchline. But the lawyer didn't smile. His voice only grew firmer. This is no error. Mr. Harrison was very clear in his intentions. Catherine's voice shook with rage. How could he do this to his own family? After everything we've given him after all these years, he chooses a pet? The lawyer paused, removing his glasses and folding his hands. Mr. Harrison left a letter that may shed light on his decision, but the fact remains. As of this moment, Max Harrison is the sole heir to his fortune. The room erupted. Shouts overlapped. Chairs scraped against the polished floor. Accusations flew like daggers. Fraud. insanity, betrayal. Each voice grew louder than the last, drowning out reason with greed. And yet, through the chaos, a soft sound broke through, a faint jingling of a collar. All heads turned as the office door opened once more. There he was, Max. The golden retriever padded into the room, golden coat gleaming under the fluorescent lights, eyes calm and unbothered by the storm of human emotion. His tail wagged gently as he walked straight to the lawyer's side, sitting with quiet dignity, as if he understood his place in this theater of disbelief. For a moment, the shouting ceased. The heirs, the cousins, the so-called family, all silenced by the sight of the one who now stood at the center of it all, the richest dog in America. And behind those calm brown eyes, hidden from everyone in that room, lay the key to a story far deeper than anyone could imagine. Outrage in the family. The silence didn't last long. It shattered like glass as Robert pushed back his chair, the legs screeching against the marble floor, his face flushed crimson, a vein pulsing at his temple. "This is insanity," he thundered, pointing an accusing finger at the lawyer. "My father was not in his right mind when he signed this. You expect us to believe he left billions to a dog?" Catherine sprang to her feet, her pearl necklace trembling against her chest. "We are his children, his blood, and he chooses this animal over us." Her voice cracked, equal parts fury and humiliation. The cousins muttered among themselves, their whispers like a rising storm. Some shook their heads in disbelief while others smirked at the absurdity, already imagining how the tabloids would devour this story. Billionaire's fortune goes to dog. The lawyer, unfazed by the chaos, simply folded his hands atop the will. "I assure you Mr. Harrison's mind was clear. He was meticulous in his wishes. His estate is now legally under the care of Max." Robert's fists slammed against the table. "No, I won't allow it. This is fraud, plain and simple. Someone manipulated him." His words sparked a chorus of agreement. A nephew scoffed loudly. "Of course. Someone got into his head. Maybe the caretaker. Maybe you." He jabbed a finger at the lawyer. "Convenient, isn't it? Billions funneled into some so-called trust for a dog. I'll bet you're the one pulling the strings." The lawyer's jaw tightened, but his tone remained even. Mr. Harrison anticipated these accusations, which is why he left very specific instructions and safeguards. The funds are locked. They cannot be touched by anyone except the trustee designated to care for Max. The words only poured gasoline on the fire. "You mean to tell me," Catherine seethed, "that our inheritance, everything my father worked for, goes to feed kibble to a mutt?" Her outburst earned gasps from the back of the room. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably, though none dared speak against her. Greed had a way of twisting truth into justification. Robert, pacing like a caged animal, clenched his jaw. "I'll take this to court. Every last penny. No judge in America would uphold this madness." The lawyer adjusted his glasses, his gaze steady. "You are free to contest the will, but I must warn you." Mr. Harrison prepared extensively for such challenges. He knew how his family might react. That last line hit like a dagger. He knew. The heirs froze for a beat, realizing their father had predicted their outrage, had even planned for it. A chill ran through the room, but it quickly dissolved into renewed fury. One by one, voices rose again, louder, sharper. Accusations hurled across the polished table. Words like selfish, betrayal, manipulation filled the air. The office, once solemn, now pulsed with venom. And through it all, Max sat quietly by the lawyer's side. His tail brushed the carpet rhythmically, ears perked, eyes calm. In the storm of greed and anger, the golden retriever was a pillar of peace, as if untouched by the chaos swirling around him. At one point, Catherine turned her wrath toward the dog himself. "Look at him. He doesn't even know what's happening. How could he possibly inherit billions? This is cruel, cruel to us." Her words hung bitter in the air. For the first time, a few relatives exchanged uncertain glances, because deep down they all knew Richard Harrison hadn't made this choice by accident. There was a reason none of them could yet see. The lawyer cleared his throat, cutting through the noise. His voice carried the weight of authority, forcing the room into silence once more. "There is more," he said, tapping the stack of papers before him. "Mr. Harrison left a letter. In it, he explains his decision, and perhaps his true intentions." Every head turned. The fury dimmed, replaced by curiosity, suspicion, even dread. The lawyer slid a sealed envelope across the table, The family leaned in, the room thick with tension. Outside, the city carried on. Honking horns, footsteps, life as usual. But within these walls, everything had changed. Max's collar jingled as he shifted, eyes fixed on the envelope as though he knew it contained the key to everything. The richest dog in America wagged his tail once, gently, almost knowingly, and the family, torn between rage and desperation, braced themselves for the truth that was about to unfold. The dog, no one understood. While the family erupted in chaos, Max remained seated, a serene figure amid a storm of human greed and confusion. His golden fur shimmered under the fluorescent lights and his deep brown eyes held a calm wisdom that no air could match. To the outsiders, he was just a dog, a companion, a pet, nothing more. But to Richard Harrison, Max had been the one constant in a life riddled with betrayal, loneliness, and calculated decisions. Max's journey to this unimaginable inheritance began long before the will was ever signed. He had arrived at the billionaire's sprawling Manhattan penthouse as a rambunctious puppy, a birthday gift to the man who had everything but joy. At first, he was a playful distraction, a creature to amuse, to pamper, to photograph for glossy magazines. Yet over time, Max became more than that. He was the shoulder to lean on during sleepless nights in the high-rise offices, the silent confidant who never judged Richard's choices, who never whispered gossip, who never demanded attention in the middle of a business deal. Max greeted his master every morning with boundless joy, his tail wagging as if to say, "You are home. You are not alone." And in those moments, Richard felt a peace he hadn't known since childhood. The family, of course, saw none of this. They couldn't understand why a man who had children, siblings, and extended relatives would place a dog above them. To them, Max was an obstacle, a symbol of their exclusion, a living insult wrapped in fur. They saw a creature incapable of appreciation, incapable of love in the human sense, incapable of carrying the weight of billions. But that was exactly the point. Richard Harrison didn't measure love, loyalty, or worth in dollars. He measured it in presence, in devotion, in trust. Max had never wavered, never deceived, never demanded more than what was offered. Every night he slept faithfully at Richard's feet. Every morning he bounded into the office, greeting Richard's partners, his staff, and his family with unwavering gentleness. The lawyer cleared his throat, reminding the family that there were rules and trustees, letters and conditions. But no clause, no document, could capture what Max represented. He was the living embodiment of loyalty, the only being who had ever truly stood by Richard's side without expectation or selfishness. As the room continued to buzz with outrage, whispers, and disbelief, a hush fell over a few onlookers who had observed Max closely. There was a quiet dignity in the way he carried himself, a grace that transcended the simple pleasures of chew toys and walks in Central Park. He had a presence that demanded respect, not through force or arrogance, but through consistency, through unconditional affection that had never once faltered. A young nephew, Michael, who had been quietly observing the scene, finally spoke up. I think I understand why he did it," he murmured, almost to himself. "It's not about the money. It's about who was truly there for him, who loved him for him, not his fortune." But even as these words hung in the air, the majority of the family scoffed or rolled their eyes. Max wagged his tail once, calmly, almost imperceptibly, as if he knew that in time they might come to understand. But not today. Today, he was just Max, the dog, the richest dog in America, seated quietly while the humans argued over the fortune he had inherited without ever lifting a finger to claim it. Richard Harrison's decision was audacious, controversial, and perhaps misunderstood by society, but it was also profoundly simple. Max had given him something no human could. He had given him loyalty, love, and unwavering companionship. And in a world where betrayal was common and intentions were often hidden, those qualities were priceless. Max shifted his weight, standing gracefully, as if to remind everyone present of the truth. Value isn't always found in bank accounts or skyscrapers. Sometimes it's found in quiet devotion, in the soft eyes of a companion who never leaves, never judges, and never asks for more than love in return. And in that moment, while the family continued to argue and shout, Max sat poised, calm, and entirely unbothered by the human chaos swirling around him. A dog no one understood, yet the most important being in the room. Memories of a lonely man. Before the scandal of the will, Before the outrage of the family, there was a man who walked through the halls of his empire alone. Richard Harrison was a figure admired by millions, a titan of industry whose name adorned skyscrapers, luxury yachts, and charitable foundations. But behind the headlines and the tailored suits, there was a man who carried a quiet emptiness, a loneliness that wealth could never fill. Even as a child, Richard had known isolation. His parents were distant, wrapped up in business and social obligations, leaving him to navigate his world alone. He learned to rely on his own mind, to trust only himself. By the time he reached adulthood, he had mastered the art of control over deals, control over people, and control over his life. But no amount of money could teach him how to navigate trust or companionship. It was in that solitude that Max entered his life, a small golden ball of fur with eyes so bright they seemed to see into Richard's soul. At first, the puppy was just a gift, a distraction, a companion to chase the echo of silence through the towering walls of the Harrison estate. But slowly, Max became the one being whose presence mattered more than any boardroom victory, more than any stock portfolio, more than the applause of the world outside. Richard remembered the nights spent pacing the penthouse, restless after another deal gone awry, the weight of expectation pressing on his shoulders. He would sit on the leather couch, head in hands, and Max would rest his muzzle on his knee, offering warmth, a heartbeat, a silent reassurance that someone cared without judgment or demand. That simple act, so ordinary to anyone else, was everything to Richard. The billionaire's memories were filled with small, intimate moments that the world would never see. Max waiting patiently by the window when Richard returned from late-night meetings, tail wagging softly as if to say, "You're home. You're safe." Morning walks through Central Park when the city was still quiet, and the only sounds were the distant hum of traffic and the soft patter of paws on pavement. Richard had laughed more in those moments than he had at any gala or award ceremony, and yet his family never noticed. They saw a man with everything, a fortune beyond imagination, fame, and power. They assumed he had all the happiness he could want. But happiness isn't counted in dollars. Happiness isn't measured in properties or yachts. For Richard, it was in the loyalty of a dog who never left, never judged, never asked for anything beyond the love he freely gave. That loyalty became a mirror, reflecting the absence of it in his human relationships. Friends betrayed him for profit. Cousins whispered behind his back. Distant relatives appeared only when they wanted something. But Max remained steadfast, an anchor in a world where trust was a rare commodity. Richard often reflected that if he had relied on humans alone, he might have lost faith in people entirely. But Max had proven that love existed outside transactions, outside expectations, outside wealth. That love was pure, unwavering, and without condition. And it was for this reason, above all others, that Richard had chosen Max as the sole heir of his estate. Not because of money, not because of grandeur, but because Max represented the kind of loyalty, devotion, and companionship that human hearts often fail to provide. As Richard's thoughts drifted through these memories, he realized that the fortune itself was secondary. The inheritance was never really about money. It was about ensuring that Max, his truest friend, would be cared for, protected and cherished even after he was gone. Max wasn't just a pet. He was the keeper of a legacy far richer than any bank account could hold. A legacy of love, trust, and the quiet understanding that sometimes the most meaningful connections are found in the simplest acts of companionship. And as the shadows of the Manhattan skyline stretched across the penthouse floor, Richard knew that in Max, he had left something far more enduring than gold or glass towers. He had left his heart, the secret clause. After the initial chaos of the will reading, the family continued to fume. But the lawyer, Mr. Stanton, calmly adjusted his glasses and held up a sealed envelope. "There is one more document," he said. "A letter from Mr. Harrison himself. It may shed light on his decision and reveal a secret clause within the will." The family leaned forward, some reluctantly, some with barely concealed greed. Robert snatched the envelope, tearing it open with shaking hands, while Catherine pressed her lips together, bracing herself for anything. Max, oblivious to the human tension, sat faithfully by the lawyer's side, tail flicking ever so slightly. The letter began formally, yet beneath the words lay an unmistakable warmth. "To those who have known me as family, friends, or colleagues, I leave not just my fortune, but a lesson. Loyalty and love cannot be measured by dollars, but by actions. I have left my estate to Max, my faithful companion, because he has shown me unwavering devotion when others could not. However, this inheritance carries a condition, one that reveals the true character of those who wish to claim it. Robert scoffed. Conditions? What kind of nonsense is this? Catherine rolled her eyes. Here we go. More theatrics from a man who clearly enjoyed tormenting us. But the lawyer continued, reading aloud. The estate shall be managed under the Max Harrison Foundation. The trustee is authorized to distribute assets only to those who demonstrate genuine care, responsibility, and devotion to Max. Anyone seeking control of the fortune must first prove their loyalty to the one being who has never wavered in his love and service to me. A hush fell over the room. The words were deliberate, meticulous, designed to provoke thought and panic. Michael, the young nephew who had quietly observed the earlier chaos, leaned forward. Wait, you mean the family can't just take the money? Mr. Stanton nodded. Correct. Access to the estate is contingent upon the trustee's judgment. No inheritance can be claimed without fulfilling the conditions set forth in the will. The magnitude of the clause began to sink in. The fortune wasn't gone. It was protected. It wasn't just Max who inherited. It was a test of character. The billionaire had anticipated greed, selfishness, and outrage, and he had constructed a safeguard powerful enough to reveal the truth about those who surrounded him. Robert's hands tightened into fists. This is blackmail disguised as law. My father, he's posthumously mocking us. Catherine shook her head. No, Robert, he's teaching us something, but it's twisted, cruel, and brilliant. The cousins whispered, some in panic, some in reluctant admiration. It was becoming clear. This wasn't merely about wealth. It was a reflection of values. Who deserved it, who was trustworthy, and who only saw opportunity. Max, for his part, remained serene. The subtle jingling of his collar reminded everyone present that the dog was no longer just a pet. He was a living embodiment of the conditions, a silent arbiter of character. Every human reaction, the outrage, the greed, the whispered conspiracies, was being measured, observed, and weighed against the simple, steadfast loyalty Max had always demonstrated. Richard Harrison's plan was unfolding exactly as he had intended. The billionaire had known that the true heirs wouldn't be those with the loudest voices or the closest bloodline, but those who could act with integrity and genuine care. Robert muttered something under his breath. Frustration and disbelief etched across his face. Catherine, surprisingly, knelt down beside Max, stroking his golden fur, and whispered softly, "You deserve this, maybe more than any of us." The tension in the room shifted slightly. The letters of outrage and disbelief were still present, but a subtle undercurrent of understanding began to ripple through a few family members. The realization dawned: money was never the true inheritance. It was a lesson, one that required humility, compassion, and recognition of loyalty in its purest form. Max shifted, lifting his head and gazing into the room with calm, steady eyes. In those eyes lay the answer to a question no one had asked. The fortune was never about him. It was about revealing who truly deserved it, who could rise above greed, and who could honor the man who had loved him unconditionally. And with that, the room, still charged with emotion, began to understand that the billionaire's final plan was more than a will. It was a revelation. Greed versus loyalty. The revelation of the secret clause shifted the atmosphere in the law office. The billionaire's will was no longer a mere distribution of wealth. It had become a test, a mirror reflecting the true nature of everyone present. And as the reality sank in, the family faced a dilemma, unlike anything they had ever encountered. Robert paced the marble floor, fists clenched. We can't just let a dog, control our inheritance. We'll do whatever it takes to prove loyalty, even if it means pretending. His eyes darted around, calculating, scheming. Every ounce of his being screamed with greed, but deep down a small voice whispered caution. Max sees everything. Catherine, in contrast, knelt beside Max, running her fingers through his golden fur. Her voice was quiet, almost reverent. You don't understand yet, Robert. This isn't about pretending if we're going to honor his wishes when it has to come from the heart. But even as she said it, a flicker of doubt passed over her face. Could she truly put aside her desire for the fortune and care for Max genuinely? Across the room, distant cousins whispered conspiratorially. Some plotted schemes, others debated the ethics of the challenge. If we show enough attention, they can't deny us access, one muttered, eyes narrowing with determination. The plan was simple: feed him, walk him, pamper him, but without real care. Max, however, was not a fool. His instincts were keen, honed over years of unwavering companionship. He would recognize the difference between affection offered for money and affection offered for love. The young nephew, Michael, remained silent, observing. He had watched the chaos unfold, the greed and the arguments, but he also noticed Max's reactions. The dog's subtle movements, the tilt of his head, the patient gaze, it all told a story that the adults refused to see. Michael understood that this was more than a fortune. It was a moral test, one that required honesty, empathy, and integrity. As the day passed, the family split into factions. Robert led a group dedicated to strategy, teaching each other how to win Max's favor while keeping their true intentions hidden. Catherine and a few others genuinely tried to bond with him, offering treats, affection, and care, not as a means to an end, but because they recognized his worth as a companion. The room, once united by outrage, was now divided by motive. Max observed everything silently, his golden eyes reflecting not only the chaos but also the choices each person made. Every gesture of insincere attention, every calculated smile, every whispered promise to manipulate him, he saw through it. And every genuine pat, every soft word, every hour spent simply sitting by his side, he acknowledged with subtle approval. By evening, the law office resembled a battlefield of intention versus desire. Greed burned hot in the hearts of some. Loyalty glowed quietly in others. And in the center of it all, Max remained calm, dignified, and unwavering, a silent judge of human character. The irony was clear. The richer the humans, the more desperate they became to prove loyalty that wasn't genuine. The one who had always been loyal without expectation, the dog, held the real power. The trustee, who had arrived earlier in the day, took careful notes, observing every interaction. This was not merely a formality. It was a crucial role in executing Richard Harrison's final plan. The trustee's eyes, sharp and perceptive, recorded who acted with honesty and who acted out of greed. Each choice, each action, each flicker of intent would determine access to the fortune. As night fell over Manhattan, the city lights glimmered outside the tall windows, reflecting off the polished marble. Inside, the tension remained thick, almost tangible. The family had learned one thing with certainty: wealth could tempt, but it could not command authenticity. And if they wished to inherit, they had to navigate a delicate path, one where their hearts, not their greed, would decide their fate. Max shifted slightly, curling at the foot of the table, his gaze calm and unwavering. He was more than a dog now. He was the gatekeeper, the final arbiter of truth. And the family, each in their own way, would soon realize that loyalty was far more valuable than money, and that no fortune could replace the lessons hidden within a quiet, golden companion. The Guardian revealed. The tension in the Harrison family had reached its peak. Arguments echoed through the law office, whispers of betrayal and scheming weaving through the room like a storm. Yet amid the chaos, one figure had remained unnoticed, a quiet presence who had long been part of Max's life. His name was Daniel Reyes, a caretaker who had been employed by Richard Harrison for over a decade. Unlike the family, Daniel had no interest in wealth, no ambition to claim a fortune, and no desire for recognition. His devotion to Max was pure, rooted in years of companionship, care, and genuine affection. He knew the dog better than anyone, the subtle shifts in his mood, the flicker in his eyes, the ways he sought comfort when the world felt overwhelming. When the lawyer finally announced that Daniel had been named the trustee in charge of the Max Harrison Foundation, the room erupted once more, but this time in disbelief. "What?" Robert shouted, his face red with anger. "You mean him? That lowly caretaker is in charge of my father's fortune?" Catherine's hands flew to her mouth, and even some of the cousins could not hide their astonishment. But Daniel remained calm, standing tall yet unassuming, eyes steady on Max. The dog wagged his tail slightly and padded over to Daniel, resting his head on the man's knee. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of years of trust and understanding. Mr. Stanton, the lawyer, cleared his throat. "Daniel Reyes has been entrusted with the responsibility of managing the estate, ensuring that Mr. Harrison's conditions are met, and that Max's well-being is prioritized above all else." Robert's jaw clenched. This is outrageous. He's not family. He doesn't belong here. How could my father—" Daniel raised a hand gently, silencing him without a word. "I didn't seek this position," he said calmly, voice steady. "I care for Max. That's all I've ever cared about. The rest is secondary." A hush fell over the room. Even the most vocal family members paused, realizing that here was someone who had no ulterior motive, no greed, no desire to manipulate or control. Just a man who had loved and cared for a dog faithfully, without expectation or reward. Max, sensing the shift in energy, nudged Daniel's hand with his nose, as if to reaffirm their bond. The room seemed to contract, the weight of the moment pressing on everyone present. Here was the living proof of Richard Harrison's intentions. Loyalty and love mattered more than bloodlines or entitlement. Catherine, who had been quietly trying to connect with Max all day, took a deep breath. She looked at Daniel and said softly, "I think I understand now. You're the only one who could really handle this. You knew him, Max, better than any of us." Daniel nodded, his eyes gentle. "I've watched him for years. He doesn't just need care. He needs people who understand what he is, what he's always been to Mr. Harrison. That's not something money can buy or titles can grant." Robert's anger simmered, but even he could not deny the truth unfolding before him. The man who had quietly existed in the shadows, overlooked and underestimated, now held the key to the fortune everyone else had fought over. And Max, the golden arbiter of trust, had chosen his guardian wisely. Outside, the city carried on unaware, lights twinkling against the Manhattan skyline. Inside, the family faced a new reality. The fortune was not theirs by right, not simply because they were related by blood. They had to navigate a moral labyrinth, and the first revelation was clear. Loyalty was more than a word. It was a test, and Daniel Reyes had passed it in ways they could never hope to match. Max curled up at Daniel's feet, calm and confident. In his serene posture lay the quiet affirmation that he trusted his guardian completely. And as the family looked on, some with disbelief, some with reluctant admiration, it became clear that Richard Harrison's plan had worked. He had not merely left a fortune, he had revealed the true heirs, not of money but of integrity, loyalty, and love. The richest dog in America had chosen wisely, and for the first time that day, the room fell silent, not in anger, but in awe. A family divided by the following morning, Manhattan's skyline glimmered in a soft dawn, yet inside the Harrison estate, the tension remained palpable. The revelation of Daniel Reyes as Max's trustee had only deepened the family's turmoil. Some family members were seething with indignation, others were cautiously reconsidering their motives, but all were united in one undeniable truth. The billionaire's fortune was no longer theirs to claim outright. Robert, still fuming from the previous day, gathered a small coalition of cousins and nephews in the library. "We can't let this stand," he whispered, eyes darting toward the door as if the walls themselves might betray him. "A dog cannot control billions, and that caretaker, he's nobody. We have influence. We can fight this in court, and we will win." Catherine, having spent hours quietly observing Max and Daniel, shook her head. "You don't understand, Robert. This isn't a battle you can win with lawyers or schemes. This is about loyalty, about trust. Max and Dad have already chosen the path we refuse to see." Robert scoffed. "Loyalty? Trust? That's sentimental nonsense. The law will decide. Money talks." But outside the library, the world was already watching. Within hours, social media had exploded with headlines. Billionaire leaves fortune to dog. Golden retriever inherits billions. Caretaker becomes trustee. Family outraged. News outlets ran live coverage, interviews with shocked neighbors, and speculative commentary from financial analysts. The Harrison estate had become a theater of public fascination, and the family's arguments were broadcast across the nation. Some relatives reveled in the attention, seeing a way to manipulate public opinion to their advantage. Others recoiled, feeling exposed and humiliated. The once united family was fracturing, lines drawn between greed and conscience. Catherine, meanwhile, spent the morning with Max, learning his routines, understanding his moods, and seeing the depth of his bond with Daniel. Each small gesture, the tilt of his head, the wag of his tail, the gentle nudge of his nose, revealed why Richard Harrison had trusted him implicitly. To Catherine, Max wasn't a fortune. He was a living testament to values her father had cherished above all else. The contrast could not have been starker. Robert's faction practiced feigned devotion, offering Max treats and attention, but their actions were hollow, calculated. Max observed silently, discerning the difference with an instinct honed over years of fidelity. The dog's gaze was unerring. He rewarded sincerity with subtle approval and ignored deceit entirely. Meanwhile, the legal battle had begun. Lawyers filed petitions, trustees were questioned, and the media scrutinized every action. The family's unity dissolved as arguments shifted from strategy to personal attacks. Greed had become a force so potent that it eroded years of familial ties, leaving suspicion, resentment, and bitterness in its wake. Yet through all the noise, Max remained the calm center. He was a silent judge, a guardian of his master's final wishes. Every decision made in his presence, every attempt to manipulate or deceive, was observed and recorded by Daniel, the trustee who understood the dog's unspoken communication. Catherine realized that the real inheritance was not just the fortune, it was a lesson. Richard Harrison had left more than wealth. He had left a challenge, a mirror to show the true nature of those around him. Only those who acted with genuine care, integrity, and humility could hope to honor his wishes. The family, divided between greed and conscience, faced a choice: continue their attempts to manipulate or recognize the wisdom in their father's final decision. For some, the allure of wealth was too strong to resist. For others, the quiet bond between a man and his dog illuminated a truth that money could never buy. Outside, the city thrummed with life, unaware of the ethical battlefield within the Harrison estate. Inside, the richest dog in America watched patiently, his golden eyes steady, knowing that the final reckoning would reveal the true heirs, not necessarily of fortune, but of character. And as the sun rose higher over Manhattan, the family's division became a symbol of the very lesson Richard Harrison had left behind: that wealth may tempt, but loyalty and integrity endure. The test of heart days had passed since the revelation of the secret clause and the appointment of Daniel Reyes as Max's trustee. The initial shock had worn off, leaving in its place a tense atmosphere of scrutiny, ambition, and quiet observation. The Harrison family was now acutely aware. Their every action, every gesture toward Max, would determine their place, or lack thereof, in Richard Harrison's legacy. Some had chosen the path of pretense, performing exaggerated acts of affection toward Max while secretly calculating how to bend the rules to their advantage. Others, however, began to realize that money alone could not win the loyalty of a creature as perceptive as a golden retriever. Among them was Catherine, whose earlier hesitation had evolved into a sincere desire to care for the dog she had come to understand. The morning began with simple acts: brushing Max's golden coat, filling his bowl with food, and walking him through the quiet streets of Manhattan before the city fully awoke. These were acts of routine and devotion, not of strategy or ambition. As Max trotted alongside her, his tail wagging gently, Catherine felt a warmth she hadn't anticipated. For the first time, she understood the depth of her father's choice. This was more than a fortune. It was a bond built on trust, consistency, and genuine love. Meanwhile, Robert and his faction attempted to game the system. They bought expensive treats, lavish toys, and even hired trainers to show they were serious. But Max, ever discerning, responded to nothing but sincerity. He ignored the extravagant gestures and focused only on those who approached him without expectation, who offered attention freely, without a calculation behind every pat or scratch behind the ears. Daniel observed it all, quietly noting who acted out of greed and who acted with authenticity. His years of experience with Max gave him insight into the subtle cues that revealed a person's true intentions. A fleeting glance, a hesitation, or a forced smile could betray a lifetime of motives. Genuine care, patience, and respect, however, could not be faked. One afternoon, a family member, a distant cousin previously overlooked, spent hours sitting quietly with Max in the garden. She didn't offer treats, she didn't call him by name excessively, and she didn't boast about her presence. Instead, she simply read aloud from a book, her voice gentle, letting Max rest his head on her lap. Max's eyes, warm and trusting, followed her every word. He lifted his head to nuzzle her hand, a subtle sign of approval that went unnoticed by others but carried enormous significance. This quiet act of patience contrasted sharply with the loud, calculated attempts of others to impress the dog. Catherine watched it unfold and realized that Richard Harrison had designed more than a legal challenge. He had created a moral one. True devotion could not be manufactured. It could only be earned through consistent, sincere effort, and the willingness to place someone else's needs above one's own ambition. Across the room, Robert's frustration grew. He could see the dog responding favorably to those acting genuinely, while his own schemes were failing. Anger, impatience, and entitlement clouded his every gesture, and Max remained unimpressed. In the simplest terms, the message was clear. Wealth and power could not force loyalty. By evening, the test had revealed its first clear outcomes. Those who had acted with sincerity had begun forming bonds with Max that felt unbreakable. Those who acted for gain were exposed. Their attempts to manipulate rendered futile. The lesson was undeniable. The richest dog in America would reward not those with money, but those with heart. As the city lights flickered on, casting golden reflections across the Manhattan skyline, Max settled in the center of the family room, curling up beside Daniel. His gaze lingered briefly on Catherine, who stroked his fur gently, and then closed his eyes, calm and content. The test was far from over, but already the path was becoming clear. Loyalty, integrity, and genuine care had begun to shine brighter than greed and ambition. And in that quiet golden moment, it became evident. The true inheritance was not merely fortune. It was the revelation of what it truly meant to love and be loved. The true heirs. The final week of Richard Harrison's posthumous challenge had arrived. Manhattan's streets sparkled with the autumn sun, yet inside the Harrison estate, tension, hope, and uncertainty mingled in the air. The family had been tested, observed, and weighed in ways they could not have imagined. The richest dog in America, Max, had quietly monitored every action, every gesture, and every thought, rewarding sincerity and revealing deceit. Daniel Reyes, as the appointed trustee, prepared to finalize his report. The law office, once a battlefield of greed and outrage, had transformed into a place of reckoning. The family's attempts to impress Max had varied in success. Some had faltered, others had persevered, but only a few had truly understood what it meant to demonstrate loyalty without expectation. Catherine stood quietly in the corner, brushing Max's golden fur. The dog leaned into her hands, eyes half closed, relaxed yet attentive. She had embraced the truth of her father's plan. The inheritance was more than money. It was a reflection of character, integrity, and genuine care. Her heart, once uncertain, now understood the depth of devotion required. Robert, on the other hand, paced the room angrily. His every attempt at calculated affection had been transparent to Max. The dog's subtle indifference had been an unspoken verdict, exposing the futility of greed and manipulation. Robert's entitlement, frustration, and impatience had barred him from achieving the one thing his father had valued above all: authentic loyalty. Across the room, a distant cousin who had previously been overlooked knelt beside Max. She whispered softly, offering her presence without expectation. Max's tail wagged slowly, his head resting gently on her shoulder. That quiet, selfless act, simple and unpretentious, was a testament to the kind of devotion Richard Harrison had cherished in life. Daniel's voice broke the silence. After careful observation, it's clear who has demonstrated true care, sincerity, and understanding of Max's needs. These individuals have earned not only my trust as trustee, but, more importantly, Max's trust. They are the rightful heirs to the privilege of managing and caring for this estate, in alignment with Richard Harrison's wishes. Catherine's eyes welled with tears, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of understanding, of gratitude, of validation. She realized that this inheritance, though immense in monetary value, was ultimately a reflection of something far greater, the measure of one's heart. Max lifted his head and nuzzled Catherine's hand. The gesture, so simple yet profound, conveyed approval and recognition. The dog's gaze then moved to the cousin beside him, acknowledging the shared sincerity and devotion between them. Every subtle movement, the wag of a tail, the tilt of a head, the gentle nudge, spoke volumes, affirming the final verdict that had been quietly unfolding for weeks. Robert's face turned red with anger, frustration, and disbelief. The lesson was harsh, but undeniable. Wealth could not manufacture loyalty. Power could not command integrity. Money could not force love. Max, the golden arbiter, had chosen with clarity, rewarding those who acted from the heart rather than the pocket. Outside the towering glass windows, Manhattan continued its relentless pace. unaware of the life-altering decisions happening inside the Harrison estate. Inside, however, the revelation was absolute. The true heirs were not those with the loudest voices, the sharpest suits, or the closest bloodlines. They were those who had loved without expectation, acted without calculation, and valued loyalty above all else. Daniel, with a quiet nod, affirmed the outcome. The estate would be managed with care, respect, and the same devotion that Richard Harrison had shown in life. Max, serene and dignified, rested at the center of it all, a living testament to the power of genuine affection and trust. And as Catherine watched the dog curl comfortably at Daniel's feet, she understood the ultimate lesson her father had left behind. The greatest inheritance is not money. It is love. It is loyalty. It is the knowledge that true value lies in the heart, not in a bank account. Max's golden eyes met hers one last time that evening, calm, wise, and unwavering. In them lay a silent message, clear and unyielding. The fortune was secondary, the test complete, and the true heirs had been revealed, not by blood, but by the enduring power of heart. Beyond the fortune, weeks had passed since the reading of Richard Harrison's will, and life at the Harrison estate had settled into a new rhythm. Max, ever calm and dignified, now moved through the home with the quiet authority of one who had seen the truth in people's hearts. The chaos of greed, media frenzy, and family disputes had faded, leaving only those who had proven themselves worthy, those who understood the true meaning of loyalty, love, and integrity. Catherine had become a devoted companion to Max, not out of ambition, but from a place of genuine affection. She spent her days learning from him, observing his instincts and discovering the subtle ways a dog could teach lessons far beyond the value of money. Daniel Reyes continued as trustee, guiding the estate with the same humility and care that had earned Max's trust in the first place. Together, they honored Richard Harrison's vision, a legacy measured not in dollars, but in hearts and actions. The story of the billionaire who left everything to his dog had captivated the world, but for those who had truly witnessed it, the lesson was clear. Wealth is fleeting, influence is temporary, but loyalty, love, and integrity endure. Max was more than a pet. He was a living reminder that the most meaningful connections cannot be bought or faked. They must be earned and cherished. As the sun set over Manhattan, casting golden light across the city skyline, one thing remained certain. The richest dog in America had not only inherited a fortune, but had also revealed the true heirs, those who understood the value of heart over wealth, devotion over greed, and compassion over entitlement. And now this story lives on, ready to inspire countless others who may wonder what truly matters in life. If you found this story as moving and unbelievable as we did, share where you're watching from in the comments. Let us know your city or state, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible, real-life stories that will move you, shock you, and make you believe in the power of loyalty, love, and the unexpected lessons from the world around us.